The morning of October 15th, 1943, the early autumn sun cut through the thick fog hanging over Aberdeen Proving Ground, Maryland. Captain James Morrison pulled his wool coat tighter around him as he walked across the gravel lot, the chill biting through the layers, leaving a faint frost on the tops of the captured enemy vehicles lined up like ghosts from a faraway war. Each one had its own story, its own lessons. German Panzers had dominated their attention in the previous years, and Italian tankettes offered mechanical puzzles. Yet today, the object awaiting his inspection seemed almost absurdly small, almost laughable in its presence. Before we jump back in, tell us where you're tuning in from, and if this story touches you, make sure you're subscribed because tomorrow I've saved something extra special for you. In Bay 3 of the Technical Analysis Division, the mechanics had already begun gathering around. Sergeant Robert Chen, with grease-stained hands and the keen eye of someone who could detect metal fatigue by touch alone, was first to speak. "Captain," he said, gesturing to the tiny olive-drab frame, "you're not going to believe the power plant in this thing." The vehicle before them was the Kuragani Type 95, a Japanese light reconnaissance car that seemed almost comically diminutive compared to its American counterparts. Barely 11 feet long and 5 feet wide, it resembled more a civilian compact car than a military truck. Its wheels, 14 inches in diameter, were little more than bicycle tires wrapped in field-grade rubber. Under its hood lay a air-cooled V-twin engine, producing 33 horsepower, barely half the output of the Willys Jeep that US forces relied on for rapid troop movement and supply transport. For a military engineer trained on the doctrine of maximum capability, this was a puzzle, an enigma. Yet, despite its diminutive appearance, the vehicle's condition spoke volumes. Scuffed, paint and minor dents hinted at a life of field service in the dense jungles of the Philippines and the Pacific Islands, but the engine ran smoothly, almost imperceptibly. Captain Morrison knelt to inspect the chassis, the suspension, the drivetrain, noting how the frame's simplicity belied the remarkable resilience it had demonstrated in months of combat operations. The maintenance logs discovered inside the glove compartment were even more astonishing. Over 42,000 miles of service in jungle conditions, often repaired using nothing more than a basic toolkit of 16 implements, with no factory intervention. American military doctrine at the time emphasized horsepower, armor, and payload. The assumptions were ingrained. Bigger engines meant faster speeds, heavier frames meant survivability. More robust suspensions ensured stability on rough terrain. But here was a vehicle designed to challenge those principles. It was light, simple, and astonishingly reliable. Its purpose was not raw power. It was endurance, adaptability, and ease of field maintenance, qualities the US Army had only begun to truly understand in theory, let alone in practice. Morrison rose and circled the tiny vehicle, noting the ergonomics of the cabin. The dashboard was functional but spare. A few gauges, a straightforward ignition system, and an unusual sequential gear shift that allowed the driver to change gears without clutch operation, a subtle but practical adaptation for steep jungle inclines. The steering wheel sat at an angle that initially felt awkward to an American engineer's eye, but it was evidently optimized for operation on uneven terrain, a necessity for reconnaissance and small unit movement. "Looks like a toy," muttered Corporal Danny Walsh, still circling, his 6-foot frame dwarfing the Type 95. Yet, even as the mechanics joked, their laughter was tinged with admiration. This vehicle, designed for soldiers smaller in stature than the average American, had survived tropical heat, mud, and monsoon rains with a fidelity that defied conventional engineering logic. Morrison, standing at the hood, opened the engine cover with care, revealing the V-twin's precisely machined cylinders and perfectly uniform cooling fins. The craftsmanship was deliberate, exacting, and profoundly efficient. The Americans had long equated military value with sheer output and scale. A 60-horsepower Willys Jeep could haul 800 pounds at speeds of up to 45 miles per hour over dirt roads, cross streams, and carry men into combat. In comparison, the Type 95 appeared underpowered, fragile, and impractical. Yet the field reports from New Guinea and the Philippines told another story. Japanese units had traversed impossible terrain, maintained operational readiness, and executed reconnaissance and supply missions under extreme conditions with a vehicle that required minimal maintenance and no specialized parts. 4. Captain Morrison. The irony struck immediately. Here, in the heart of the American Technical Analysis Division, surrounded by tools, charts, and the accumulated wisdom of 2 years of Pacific combat, lay a machine that broke every assumption they had been taught. The Japanese had deliberately chosen simplicity over raw strength, efficiency over speed, and reliability over flashy power, a philosophy that ran counter to the engineering instincts drilled into the U.S. Army's mechanics and planners. As the day progressed, the team began dismantling components systematically. They measured tolerances, examined welds, and tested suspension articulation. Each discovery contradicted American expectations. The gearbox operated smoothly, even under stress tests far beyond its supposed capacity. The frame, though light, resisted torsion and flexed in a controlled manner. And most striking of all, the engine itself, small as it was, exhibited precision craftsmanship reminiscent of pre-war. Harley-Davidson motorcycle engines, adapted expertly for automotive use. By late afternoon, Captain Morrison stepped back, wiping a thin sheen of sweat from his brow. The fog had lifted, revealing the rows of larger vehicles outside, and he felt a profound shift in perspective. The Type 95 Jeep was not a joke, nor was it an inferior design. It was an embodiment of a different wartime philosophy, one that emphasized what mattered in jungle warfare: endurance, simplicity, and adaptability. This realization would not only challenge American assumptions about mechanical superiority in the Pacific, but also provide invaluable lessons for the design of future vehicles, field logistics, and operational doctrine. The tiny 33-horsepower engine, so easily dismissed at first glance, had revealed the subtle genius of Japanese engineering philosophy, reshaping how U.S. mechanics would think about mobility, efficiency, and survival in war zones far removed from the European theatre. The following morning, the fog had lifted entirely, revealing the grey expanse of the proving ground. Inside Bay 3, the team gathered around the Type 95 with renewed focus. Captain Morrison issued instructions with quiet precision, aware that what they were about to uncover might reshape their understanding of Japanese military engineering. Sergeant Chen began by examining the drivetrain. The vehicle employed a lightweight, ladder-style frame, optimized for ease of repair and rapid replacement of damaged sections. Each component had been designed to be interchangeable with minimal tools, a feature Morrison immediately recognized as invaluable in the isolated jungles of the Pacific Islands, where supply lines were stretched thin and factory support was non-existent. Unlike American designs, which relied on robust but heavy frames that required specialized tools for repairs, the Type 95's modular construction allowed field repairs under virtually any conditions. Next came the engine. The air-cooled V-twin, though producing only 33 horsepower, displayed meticulous engineering. Cooling fins were perfectly aligned, and the carburetor bore machining tolerances that would rival any pre-war Harley-Davidson motorcycle engine. Sergeant Macready, a veteran of months in New Guinea, ran the engine through a series of stress tests, noting the surprisingly consistent performance. Even under simulated tropical heat and high humidity, the V-twin maintained near-optimal temperature and did not suffer the stalling or overheating that would plague many American engines in similar environments. Captain Morrison leaned closer, squinting at the sequential gear shift. Unlike American H-pattern gearboxes, this system allowed clutchless shifting, which made it possible to traverse steep inclines and rough terrain without interrupting forward motion. On jungle trails where traction was limited, the design provided an immediate tactical advantage. Morrison tapped the dashboard lightly, noting its simplicity and clarity. The gauges displayed only the essential information: engine temperature, oil pressure, and speed. Everything extraneous had been removed to reduce points of failure. By late morning, the team moved on to the suspension system. Here again, simplicity had been prioritized, but with remarkable efficiency. The Type 95 employed semi-elliptical leaf springs that allowed moderate articulation over uneven terrain while maintaining vehicle stability. Combined with the narrow 14-inch tires, the car could slip through jungle paths, ford shallow streams, and negotiate slopes that would have immobilized a heavier American Jeep. Morrison noted the irony. Where American doctrine had equated heavier frames with durability, the Type 95's lighter, more flexible design proved far more capable in the dense and rugged Pacific environment. The most compelling revelations, however, came from the field maintenance reports. The vehicle had been operated continuously for months without factory intervention, often repaired with scavenged parts and improvised solutions. Bearings, spark plugs, and engine components had been replaced in the field using basic hand tools, yet the vehicle maintained operational readiness. One report documented a unit traveling over 400 miles of jungle roads in Luzon, Mindoro, and Leyte without a single breakdown, a feat that impressed the mechanics more than any power or armor specification could. Preparing and narrating this story took us a lot of time, so if you are enjoying it, subscribe to our channel. It means a lot to us. Now back to the story. As the evidence mounted, a subtle tension filled the room. The mechanic's laughter had faded into quiet reflection. Corporal Walsh, who had joked about the Type 95 looking like a child's toy, now muttered, "I don't think this thing is a joke anymore." Morrison nodded silently. He understood that they were witnessing a different wartime logic, one that valued operational endurance, minimal maintenance requirements, and adaptability above raw horsepower and size. The chronological context of the Type 95's design further illuminated its philosophy. Introduced in the mid-1932s as a reconnaissance and liaison vehicle, it was intended to operate in areas where conventional vehicles would fail. Narrow jungle paths, mountainous terrain, and regions where fuel and spare parts were scarce. Japanese engineers had prioritized lightweight construction, mechanical simplicity, and field serviceability precisely because these constraints were expected in the Pacific theater. Whereas American designers assumed roads, heavy logistical support, and abundant fuel, the Japanese anticipated that soldiers would often be isolated, working with minimal resupply. The 33-horsepower engine was not a flaw. It was a deliberate choice, sufficient to carry a small crew and their gear while maintaining low fuel consumption and reliability. By mid-afternoon, the team assembled outside for a practical demonstration. The Type 95 was driven along a makeshift course simulating jungle terrain. It climbed inclines, splashed through shallow streams, and maneuvered along narrow embankments with a steadiness that defied the American engineers' expectations. Observers noted the vehicle's remarkable balance and agility, its ability to recover from minor slides without tipping, and the quiet efficiency of its powertrain. The simplicity that had initially seemed like a limitation now revealed itself as an elegant solution to operational challenges. Captain Morrison documented every detail in his notebook, aware that this small machine embodied lessons that could influence American vehicle design for years to come. The Type 95 challenged fundamental assumptions, that size and horsepower equaled superiority, that heavier frames meant survivability, that complex machinery outperformed simple solutions. Here was proof that ingenuity could manifest in unexpected, subtle forms, tailored precisely to the environment in which it would be used. The final confirmation came in the form of a comparative analysis. Engineers tested the Type 95 alongside a Willys Jeep under identical conditions: mud, inclines, and water crossings. While the Jeep performed admirably on open paths, it struggled in narrow or steep trails, requiring more careful maneuvering and often stalling under overtaxed engines. By contrast, the Type 95 completed the course consistently, needing only minor adjustments. The 33-horsepower engine, so easily dismissed in the early inspection, had proven sufficient, resilient, and remarkably well matched to its intended environment. By evening, the mood in Bay 3 had shifted. What had begun as a humorous curiosity had transformed into a profound recognition of alternative engineering, philosophy, Morrison wrote in his report, "The Kuragani Type 95 is not merely a light vehicle, it is a study in efficiency, endurance, and operational adaptation. Our assumptions regarding horsepower and vehicle design require reconsideration in light of this evidence." This moment marked the Americans' first real confrontation with the paradox of Japanese ingenuity in small-scale design. The Type 95, which had seemed fragile and underpowered, revealed the hidden strengths of minimalism, precision, and adaptability, qualities that had allowed Japanese units to operate effectively in conditions that would have immobilized conventional vehicles. In understanding this small machine, the Americans gained insight not only into Japanese engineering, but also into the broader philosophical divergence that shaped Pacific warfare. That survival, efficiency, and environmental adaptation could outweigh brute force, size, or technological complexity. In the weeks following, the tests at Aberdeen, Captain Morrison's report circulated among the U.S. Army's engineering and procurement divisions, initially eliciting skepticism. Field officers accustomed to equating power with capability found it difficult to accept that a 33-horsepower engine could reliably support months of operations in harsh tropical conditions. Yet the data was irrefutable. The Type 95 had traversed hundreds of miles of jungle trails, maintained consistent mechanical performance, and required minimal field maintenance. Every anecdote in the maintenance logs, every measured torque reading, and every field repair documented a machine designed with practical intelligence rather than brute engineering force. American engineers began to reconsider aspects of small vehicle design for forward-deployed units. Discussions at Aberdeen and later at the Quartermaster Corps emphasized the importance of reliability, modularity, and environmental suitability over raw power. While the Willys Jeep remained a highly capable vehicle, the lessons learned from the Type 95 informed training programs, emphasizing preventive maintenance, field improvisation, and the careful evaluation of terrain-specific requirements. The captured Japanese vehicle demonstrated that engineering success in warfare was as much about operational philosophy as technical specifications. Beyond technical lessons, the psychological impact on U.S. personnel was significant. Soldiers and mechanics who had initially laughed at the Type 95 began to understand the underlying ingenuity of Japanese wartime adaptation. Unlike the United States, which relied on vast industrial output and logistics, Japanese units in the Pacific often operated under severe resource constraints. Their vehicles, like the Type 95, reflected a philosophy that accepted limitations and worked within them, producing solutions that were deceptively simple yet extraordinarily effective. The Type 95 also highlighted the importance of contextual intelligence. Military planners learned that technological assessments could not be made in isolation from environmental, cultural, and logistical realities. An engine's horsepower or a vehicle's weight, impressive in a laboratory or on paper, might not correlate with battlefield effectiveness. Morrison's team realized that Western assumptions about superiority, fueled by industrial capacity, power, and size, could obscure the strengths of adversaries who engineered solutions for specific conditions. As the war continued into 1944 and 1945, the operational legacy of these lessons became apparent. American reconnaissance vehicles increasingly incorporated design principles emphasizing durability, maintainability, and adaptability, qualities that had been demonstrated by the Type 95. Soldiers who had previously taken heavy, high-powered vehicles for granted began to appreciate the value of simplicity and reliability in operational planning, particularly in remote theaters where logistical support was limited. In retrospect, the Type 95 served as a microcosm of the broader strategic dynamics in the Pacific War. The Japanese military, constrained by limited resources and dispersed geography, often favored elegant, pragmatic solutions over brute force. These choices sometimes produced unexpected advantages, enabling small units to operate effectively despite material inferiority. Conversely, American forces, operating with industrial abundance, initially struggled to recognize the operational ingenuity embedded in seemingly inferior enemy equipment. The captured Type 95 thus became both a technical curiosity and a profound lesson in the psychology of warfare. For Captain Morrison, Sergeant Chen, and the engineers at Aberdeen, the Type 95 was more than a mechanical puzzle. It was a mirror reflecting assumptions, biases, and doctrinal blind spots. They had entered Bay 3 expecting a laughable machine and emerged with a sober appreciation for the ingenuity that can thrive under constraint. In writing the final entries of his report, Morrison reflected, "This vehicle embodies the principle that simplicity, precision, and adaptability often achieve results that surpass brute strength. Understanding this is essential not only for engineering, but for comprehending the mindset and operational capabilities of our adversaries." The captured Type 95 eventually found its way into the Army's historical collection, preserved as a testament to the unassuming brilliance of Japanese design. It would inspire decades of study, not because it was powerful or flashy, but because it revealed a deeper truth about wartime innovation. Success is often defined not by raw specifications, but by how well a solution aligns with the realities of its environment and mission. By the time the war in the Pacific drew to a close, in August 1945, the Americans had absorbed countless lessons from captured enemy equipment, yet the Type 95 remained emblematic of one enduring insight. Victory is not determined solely by industrial might, technological superiority, or horsepower on paper, but by the interplay of design, environment, and human adaptability. In the jungles of the Philippines, the islands of New Guinea, and the beaches of Leyte, small, unassuming machines like this, 33 horsepower scout car, had quietly altered operational expectations and reshaped the thinking of an industrial superpower. And so, the story closes where it began. A vehicle once laughed at, mocked for its modest engine and toy-like appearance, revealed the hidden genius of constraint-driven design. What American mechanics first saw as a curiosity became a lesson in humility, ingenuity, and the necessity of questioning assumptions in the study of warfare. In examining the Type 95, the United States Army learned a timeless truth. The battlefield favors not always the largest or most powerful, but often those who make the cleverest, simplest, and most adaptable use of what they have. Even decades after the guns fell silent across the Pacific, the captured Type 95 continued to spark reflection among military historians, engineers, and strategists. Its significance was not in the 33 horsepower engine or the tiny frame, but in the philosophy embedded in every bolt and gear. Analysts noted that while American doctrine had emphasized maximum capability, redundancy, and brute force, the Japanese approach in the Pacific, embodied by vehicles like the Type 95, was hyper-efficient, purpose-driven, and psychologically adapted to resource scarcity. Military theorists later drew parallels between the Type 95 and other forms of constraint-driven innovation. Just as the vehicle performed long-term operations with minimal maintenance in dense jungles, the Japanese Army often engineered solutions that prioritized reliability over raw performance, from lightweight artillery to improvised supply chains. In contrast, the Americans, with unparalleled industrial capacity, initially struggled to grasp the operational value of minimalism and adaptability. The captured scout car became a symbol of how small, thoughtful designs could amplify combat effectiveness in ways raw numbers and horsepower could not predict. The story of the Type 95 also entered discussions on modern military vehicle design. In the post-war decades, lessons from this diminutive vehicle influenced doctrines that emphasized modular design, maintainability in austere environments, and adaptability to local conditions. Engineers studying captured Japanese equipment began to appreciate that simpler, lighter vehicles often outperformed heavier, more complex designs when logistics and terrain were limiting factors. The philosophy behind the Type 95 resonated not only in vehicle engineering but in broader operational planning. A small, well-adapted force can accomplish disproportionately large effects if it understands its environment and constraints. Psychologically, the story remains instructive. Soldiers and engineers who first laughed at the Type 95 were reminded that preconceptions based on appearances, statistics, or industrial scale can blind even the most educated observers. Victory in war often hinges not on brute power alone, but on the capacity to recognize ingenuity, learn from unexpected sources, and adjust assumptions in real time. Morrison's final reflection that simplicity, precision, and adaptability can surpass raw strength became a guiding principle for intelligence analysis, engineering assessment, and battlefield decision-making, long after the conflict ended. In museums, archives, and history books, the Type 95 lives on as a quiet testament to the ingenuity born of constraint, a reminder that every piece of equipment tells a story far richer than its specifications. It illustrates that even something as modest as a 33-horsepower scout car can reveal truths about human adaptability, cultural philosophy, and the complex calculus of warfare. For contemporary audiences, the vehicle provides a lens through which to understand not only World War II, but the broader human lesson. Efficiency, cleverness, and purpose-driven design often leave a more lasting impact than raw power alone. As a final thought, the captured Type 95 challenges us to reconsider how we evaluate tools, people, and ideas. Its lesson transcends the Pacific jungles and the laboratories at Aberdeen. In any environment, the smartest solution is often the one that works best within the limits of reality, not the one that looks strongest on paper. The laughter of the engineers gave way to a profound respect, and in that transformation lies the enduring legacy of this small, unassuming vehicle, a testament to the subtle genius hidden in the everyday artifacts of war. By the time the Type 95 reached the hands of U.S. engineers at Aberdeen, it carried more than just metal and machinery. It carried the imprint of the men who had relied on it for survival across the Pacific jungles. Soldiers assigned to reconnaissance, supply runs, and communications had learned to treat their tiny vehicles not as toys, but as lifelines. Maintenance was not conducted in garages with cranes and spare parts, but under palm trees, in mud, rain, and heat so intense that steel almost seemed to bend under the sun. Yet the Type 95 endured. Field reports included small, telling details that illustrated the human ingenuity surrounding the vehicle. A platoon in New Guinea recorded how they cannibalized one vehicle to keep 3 others running, improvising with wire, bamboo, and salvaged bearings. A mechanic described using a leaf pressed against the engine as a temporary gasket when the proper part failed, a solution that worked until formal replacement arrived months later. These improvised solutions were invisible to the larger war effort, yet they were essential for survival and operational continuity. The contrast between American expectations and Japanese practice could be seen in daily routines. American troops often scheduled strict maintenance intervals, relying on supply chains and standardized parts. Japanese soldiers adapted to the machine's quirks, pushing it beyond its intended limits while keeping it operational through observation and ingenuity. One sergeant reported driving a Type 95 for over 1,000 miles across jungle roads so rough that most trucks would have shed wheels. The little vehicle simply kept going. It was not raw horsepower that mattered, it was understanding the machine intimately, respecting its limits, and finding clever ways around them. The engineers at Aberdeen were initially bemused by the vehicle's diminutive size and modest engine, but over weeks of testing they began to appreciate the human factor behind its design. Every lever, gauge, and wheel placement reflected a careful consideration of the average Japanese soldier, their height, strength, endurance, and the environmental conditions they faced. It was a vehicle not built to dominate in numbers or brute force, but to maximize human-machine synergy in harsh conditions. Letters and diaries from the Pacific corroborate this. Soldiers often mentioned the reliability of their vehicles, even when other equipment failed spectacularly. One log noted, "The truck carried our rations, radio, and water through rivers that would have swallowed our larger trucks. It did not falter. It never stopped. We barely had to touch it, and it never let us down." Such anecdotes reveal a psychological confidence soldiers trusted their machines because they had been designed with their lives in mind, a trust that American engineers initially overlooked when judging performance solely by horsepower. By the end of the war, the Type 95 had become more than a vehicle. It was a symbol of practical ingenuity under constraint, a quiet testament to adaptation, and a lens into the daily lives of Japanese soldiers in extreme conditions. For the Americans examining it later, the experience became a lesson in humility. The simplest solution, when intelligently applied, could outperform even the most powerful machine when paired with skill, discipline, and deep understanding of context. And so, the story of the Type 95 concludes not with grand battles or dramatic explosions, but with small human victories. A soldier making a precarious jungle crossing, a mechanic improvising a part, an engineer finally understanding that clever design sometimes defies conventional expectations. In the end, the vehicle taught those who studied it an enduring lesson about the value of adaptation, the limits of assumptions, and the quiet genius hidden in the everyday machinery of war. Once the captured Type 95 arrived at Aberdeen Proving Ground, the quiet marvel that had carried soldiers across jungles and rivers became a subject of intense scrutiny. Engineers and mechanics approached it with skepticism. The diminutive frame and 33-horsepower engine seemed laughably inadequate. Yet every test run, every dismantling and reassembly, revealed subtle engineering choices that reflected a completely different approach to military utility. Unlike American vehicles, which emphasized raw power, standardization, and heavy armor, the Type 95 emphasized efficiency, adaptability, and maintenance simplicity. The cooling system, carefully machined with uniform fins, allowed prolonged operation in extreme heat. The transmission, designed for sequential shifting without a clutch, allowed rapid adaptation to steep, uneven terrain. Every design element was informed not by brute force, but by practical field experience under severe environmental conditions. The Americans began to see the broader implications. If the Japanese could create such a reliable vehicle with so little horsepower and resources, what else had they achieved in other areas? The observation forced a re-evaluation of enemy logistics, maintenance philosophy, and troop mobility. Reports highlighted that in jungle operations, smaller, lighter vehicles could outperform larger trucks, which frequently bogged down or required extensive repairs. This insight would influence U.S. military doctrine in the post-war years, shaping approaches to light vehicle design, field maintenance, and operational flexibility. Beyond mechanics, the psychological shift was profound. Engineers who had mocked the Type 95 came to admire the ingenuity embedded in simplicity, recognizing that effectiveness was not always synonymous with size or horsepower. One diary entry from a lead engineer at Aberdeen noted, "We laughed at its engine, yet it taught us a lesson in humility. Power alone does not make a machine valuable adaptation and reliability do." The Type 95 also left a legacy in historical understanding. Its operational success demonstrated that the Japanese military often prioritized practical performance, tailored to environmental conditions over conventional metrics of strength or capability. Whereas American doctrine relied on standardized, heavily powered vehicles, the Japanese embraced a philosophy of resource-conscious, environment-specific design. This perspective informed post-war military and industrial studies, influencing engineers and tacticians who sought light, versatile, and resilient vehicles for varied terrains. Finally, the story of the Type 95 reminds us that war is not only fought with large guns and armored divisions, but also through small, overlooked innovations that enable soldiers to survive and operate effectively. The 33, the horsepower engine that once prompted ridicule, became a symbol of ingenuity, a testament to the subtle, human-centered engineering that often determines the outcome of campaigns long before armies clash in pitched battles. As U.S. engineers documented every detail, the Type 95 quietly assumed its place in history, not as a spectacular weapon, but as a lesson in efficiency, reliability, and the intelligence inherent in simplicity. In the end, the captured vehicle revealed more than just design choices. It revealed a way of thinking, one shaped by terrain, necessity, and the relentless drive to make limited resources do the maximum work, a lesson that would resonate far beyond the jungles of the Pacific. Even after the technical reports were filed and the last tests completed at Aberdeen, the captured Type 95 continued to resonate in the minds of those who had studied it. For the men who had initially laughed at the vehicle's 33-horsepower engine, the experience became a lesson in the limits of assumptions and the dangers of underestimating an opponent. Every scratch on its olive-drab body, every mark on the narrow tires, told a story of practical triumph in the harshest conditions, where heavier, more powerful machines would have failed. The significance of the Type 95 extended beyond the engineering lab. For frontline soldiers in the Pacific, the vehicle exemplified Japanese ingenuity in mobility, logistics, and small unit operations. Its very existence challenged the U.S. military's prevailing belief that battlefield effectiveness required sheer size, horsepower, and firepower. Here was proof that clever design and careful maintenance could achieve results that raw metrics could not predict. Historians would later reflect that the Type 95 offered insight not only into Japanese military engineering, but also into the philosophy underpinning the Imperial Army's approach to warfare. Resources were scarce, supply lines fragile, and terrain often unforgiving. Yet, the Japanese maximized the utility of every tool, every vehicle, and every soldier. The Type 95 was a microcosm of this mindset: small, reliable, and deceptively capable. For the engineers and mechanics at Aberdeen, the captured vehicle also sparked questions about American design philosophy. Could the U.S. military have incorporated elements of this lightweight adaptability into its own vehicles? Could similar principles improve field maintenance and operational flexibility in remote theaters? In subsequent decades, these lessons would inform post-war U.S. military vehicle design, emphasizing modularity, ease of repair, and terrain-specific functionality, even in entirely different conflicts. Beyond doctrine, the story carries a human lesson. In war, as in life, preconceived notions often blind us to innovation and effectiveness that doesn't fit our expectations. The Americans had laughed at the Type 95, yet it had quietly survived months of combat, jungle floods, and mechanical abuse. Its persistence challenged arrogance and reminded observers that ingenuity often lies in subtlety, not spectacle. Even now, photographs of the vehicle in testing mechanics peering under the hood, engineers taking precise measurements, serve as enduring reminders. Each image captures the collision of skepticism and admiration, illustrating how a seemingly insignificant object can provoke profound re-evaluation of assumptions. In a war often remembered for its massive machines and catastrophic battles, the Type 95 stands as a quiet testament to practical intelligence and the human element of warfare. As historians, engineers, and storytellers recount the vehicle's journey from the jungles of New Guinea to the high bays of Aberdeen, it becomes clear that the true value of the Type 95 was never its size or power, but its lesson in resilience, adaptability, and the surprising ways innovation manifests under pressure. In the end, the 33-horsepower engine that once drew laughter now embodies the enduring truth that effectiveness is measured not by expectations, but by results in the field. The Type 95 reminds us that history is often hidden in the details, in the overlooked, the underestimated, and the quietly efficient. Its story invites reflection on the ingenuity of those who labor in difficult conditions, the subtle art of engineering under constraint, and the importance of humility in the face of what may at first seem laughable or trivial. For all its modesty, the vehicle remains a symbol, a small machine, but a profound teacher of enduring lessons about resourcefulness, design philosophy, and the human dimension of warfare. Decades later, the captured Type 95 continues to appear in historical discussions, technical retrospectives, and museum exhibitions. It is more than just a small Japanese vehicle. It is a lens through which we can examine the psychology of warfare, the ingenuity of improvisation, and the complexity of underappreciated technologies. Engineers, military historians, and even students of logistics study it not because it changed the course of battles directly, but because it illuminates the often overlooked factors that determine success in combat. In the jungles and mountains of the Pacific, the Type 95 enabled Japanese forces to maintain mobility under conditions that would have immobilized larger, more powerful vehicles. Its 33-horsepower engine, though modest, was meticulously engineered to endure heat, mud, and continuous strain. For U.S. forces encountering these small scout cars, the initial reaction was often dismissive incredulity, yet reports consistently documented their surprising endurance and reliability. Each field encounter with a Type 95 revealed a small but persistent advantage, rooted in simplicity and practicality, an advantage that conventional metrics failed to capture. The story also demonstrates the critical role of observation, analysis, and adaptation in warfare. At Aberdeen, American engineers did more than laugh. They measured, tested, and studied the vehicle. This rigorous process transformed initial amusement into appreciation and insight, yielding lessons applicable not only to military engineering, but to the broader study of innovation under constraints. The Type 95 became a symbol of how careful analysis can uncover value where assumptions suggest none exists. Beyond engineering, the captured vehicle embodies a deeper human lesson. In war, as in life, perception can be misleading, and effectiveness is rarely measured by appearances alone. Small, understated, and easily overlooked, the Type 95 quietly delivered results in theaters where larger machines struggled or failed. It reminds us that resilience, ingenuity, and the careful application of limited resources often outweigh raw power and scale. Finally, the Type 95's journey from a jungle road in New Guinea to a testing bay in Maryland underscores the interconnected nature of war and technology. A single, seemingly inconsequential machine can provoke reconsideration of doctrine, inspire design improvements, and shape understanding of an enemy's capabilities. In a conflict often remembered for massive battleships, towering aircraft, and decisive offensives, this diminutive vehicle reminds us that small, thoughtful innovations can leave an outsized impact on the human understanding of warfare. Even today, when engineers or historians recount the story of the Type 95, they often emphasize the paradox it represents. Something that appears weak can be extraordinarily effective, something that seems insignificant can provoke deep reflection, and something laughed at can teach enduring lessons about strategy, design, and human perception. In the end, the captured Japanese Jeep was not merely a 33-horsepower curiosity, it was a testament to the unexpected genius that can emerge when necessity meets ingenuity, and a reminder that even the smallest tools can leave a lasting imprint on history. Even as the war moved toward its final stages in 1945, the lessons gleaned from the Type 95 continued to ripple through U.S. military thinking. For engineers at Aberdeen, and later in stateside research and development units, the captured vehicle became a benchmark in efficiency under constraint. Unlike larger, more powerful vehicles, it demonstrated that the success of military hardware often depends not on its raw output, but on the intelligent application of design to the operational environment. This small, 33-horsepower scout car became a quiet teacher of humility for those accustomed to measuring superiority by horsepower, armor, or firepower. American mechanics who once laughed at the Type 95 came to admire the discipline, precision, and foresight evident in its design. In their post-war reports, engineers repeatedly emphasized that simplicity could be a weapon just as powerful as complexity, especially when soldiers in the field faced hostile terrain, limited maintenance tools, and continuous operational stress. From a psychological perspective, the Type 95 also revealed a deeper lesson about preconceived notions of the enemy. U.S. forces often underestimated Japanese engineering, assuming that smaller, lighter, or differently designed vehicles were inherently inferior. The captured Jeep shattered this belief, forcing a recognition that effectiveness is context-dependent. It highlighted that ingenuity and adaptability qualities, often overlooked in favor of brute force, could confer substantial tactical advantages. In a broader historical context, The Type 95 exemplifies the hidden layers of warfare, the micro-stories that unfold beneath the headlines of major battles. While fleets clashed in the Pacific and aerial campaigns dominated the narrative, small vehicles like the Type 95 enabled reconnaissance, supply, and rapid communication that quietly sustained operations. These micro-level advantages, though invisible to strategic overviews, often determined the day-to-day effectiveness and survivability of frontline units. Ultimately, the story of the Type 95 reminds us that in the theatre of war, the measure of success is not always obvious, and the lessons worth learning often come from unexpected places. For modern historians, engineers, and military enthusiasts, it underscores the importance of detailed observation, critical analysis, and an open mind toward unconventional solutions. A vehicle that initially provoked laughter can, upon closer study, teach enduring lessons about resilience, efficiency, and the ingenuity inherent in all human endeavors. In reflecting on the Type 95 today, we see more than a curious artifact. We see a tangible symbol of how war challenges assumptions, rewards clever design, and reshapes our understanding of what is possible under constraint. It is a quiet testament to the idea that even the smallest machines can illuminate profound truths about human ingenuity and the realities of combat. Even decades after the war, the captured Type 95 remained a quiet reminder of the unexpected dimensions of military innovation. For the engineers at Aberdeen, its value went far beyond the curiosity of a 33-horsepower engine. The vehicle became a lesson in resourcefulness, demonstrating how constraints imposed by geography, materials, and manpower could be transformed into strengths. While the Willys Jeep excelled at raw capability, the Type 95 excelled at reliability, simplicity, and adaptability, traits that would influence post-war thinking about vehicle design in the U.S. military. Surviving maintenance records revealed something almost astonishing. The vehicle had traveled tens of thousands of miles in dense jungles, muddy tracks, and torrential monsoons, requiring nothing more than a minimal set of tools and regular field care. Its compact size allowed it to maneuver where larger trucks could not, while its lightweight construction reduced the risk of mechanical failure under harsh conditions. Engineers realized that durability and ease of maintenance could outweigh sheer horsepower, especially when operations demanded sustained mobility in remote or hostile environments. Psychologically, the Type 95 challenged long-held assumptions about the enemy. U.S. personnel had often equated small size or modest specifications with inferiority, yet here was a machine that, in the right hands and circumstances, outperformed expectations in ways that raw numbers could not predict. It forced a re-evaluation of the notion that technological superiority was always measured by strength, speed, or firepower. Adaptation, precision, and thoughtful design proved just as critical to operational success. In a broader sense, the Type 95 also embodied the human element of war. Its creation reflected the Japanese understanding of their soldiers' needs, their terrain, and their logistical limitations. The engineers who designed it were solving problems rooted in daily survival and tactical necessity, not simply aiming to compete in a horsepower race. For American observers, the lesson was clear. Victory often hinges on ingenuity, not just brute strength. Today, historians and military engineers look back at the Type 95, not as a novelty, but as a symbol of intelligent adaptation under constraint. It stands as a reminder that warfare is not just a contest of machines, but of ideas. Even the smallest, seemingly unimpressive artifacts can reveal profound truths about the strategies, priorities, and ingenuity of those who created them. The captured Type 95 Jeep, once laughed at, endures as a quiet testament to the unexpected wisdom hidden in the overlooked corners of history. Up next, you've got two more standout stories right on your screen. If this one hit the mark, you won't want to pass these up. Just click and check them out. And don't forget to subscribe and turn on the notification bell, so you don't miss any upload from us.